Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about building a sustainable studio without losing control. We all know building a game studio is a challenge, but often don't realize the bigger challenge is keeping it alive, because it's rarely a big mistake that brings the studio down. It's the smaller decisions that do it, leaving us wondering where things went wrong. So today we're going to unpack what sustainable studio growth actually looks like so you can grow with confidence, stay true to your vision, and keep on track so you never lose control of what you worked so hard to build. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, and we're back, and today with us I have Angela Mejia. Angela, how's it going? And thank you so much for being here today.
It's going great. This year has been a year of big projects for Clear Place. So
Nice.
yeah, it's a different setup for me, but that's interesting. A lot of changes.
Yes, definitely. Well, folks, as Angela just mentioned briefly about Clever Plays, little quick introduction here. She is the co-founder and general director at Clever Plays Studio. And also you've worked extensively too with Indie Angels as a founder and general director there. Curious to know a little bit about Clever Plays, Indie Angels, and anything else that you have done, because I know there's quite a bit there that you've been involved with in the industry.
So yeah, we created Clever Plays in 2013, and so far we have shipped 2 games, Leap of Fate, a roguelike game in 2016, and in 2021 we released Operation Tango, which was actually very successful. The game sold more than 1 million units, and we got the best multiplayer game at Gamescom 2020,
Nice.
and also the best multiplayer game at Indie Arena Booth in 2021. And we also get the best design at Tokyo Game Show, Sense of Wonder.
Wow.
Those to name the most critical awards that Operation Tango won. And from that experience, we receive a lot of love from the community. That has been really a treat to me to receive all that love. And from that, I created Indie Angels, a marketing agency that now is in hibernation just because Clever Place has bigger projects. But within the Angels, we were able to help different teams in Canada mostly to help to support their marketing campaigns. And I did that during almost 5 years. But Indie Angels is not dead. It's just in hibernation. This year, I decided to put more my energy into Clever Place projects because they're getting bigger. And the campaigns that we're doing now, they're warming up. You need to be very careful, paying a lot of attention to do your best. So that's where we are right now. And Clever Place announced our last game in 2024, Happy Bastards. It's a long campaign because we wanted to develop the community properly. We're in the middle of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all that stuff and everything. And yeah, it's, I think there's a key thing in that too, is like you've done all this other work and everything else, in particular with Indie Angels, but you even said it yourself. It's like at a certain point, sometimes you really got to like double down on certain objectives and stuff. And right now for you guys, that's, Clever Plays and everything. And I think it's just important to say that, because sometimes it's like we're involved in so many different things and we still want to be everywhere, but we can't. Right? I mean, that's kind of the reality of it sometimes, that we have to come to those terms.
Yeah, and it was a very hard decision to me, actually. I got a little bit sad. I got very sad, actually, when I came to the conclusion that I needed to do that. But I love to do that job because it brought me a lot of things, positive things in my life. I got the opportunity to work with wonderful teams, wonderful people. I was able to go around in Canada to meet different people, and I loved it. I really did. But you have to choose your battles, and also choose wisely where you invest your energy, because we're limited on that
Yeah.
area, right? We have limited time, and we cannot just expect to win at everything. So
Yeah.
very.
I love it. I love that take. Well, Angela, I can't thank you enough for sharing that about yourself and about the work you guys do. But that said, I think we would all like to get to know you a little bit more. And how we do that is through the Q box round, where I have some quick random questions prepared here for today for Angela. So, Angela, the question that I have right now is, are you ready for the Q box round?
I am.
Excellent. All right. First is, what's the most helpful or impactful advice you ever received?
It's a combination of, I think, experience because I was reflecting on that and I was thinking, what is the best advice? I think it's wisdom through experience that I would like to share. So I'm somebody who really loves to work with the truth. And sometimes people give you niceness instead of their true, honest thoughts.
Mm,
And I think that leads you to wasting your energy and your time. So I think when you go through honesty, it's harder because sometimes it's not necessarily the niceness, right? Obviously, you can say honest comments with niceness tone, but I think honesty really helps you to grow and it helps you to speed up your development in whatever you do. So I try to be very honest, even though sometimes it's very hard to do because sometimes you sacrifice like niceness. But I think sometimes niceness it just makes your path longer and you're just wasting your time. So I love to work with the truth and honesty. I favor that a lot. And second thing I do a lot is to try to improve the quality of decisions that we do. And I don't assume that I know everything. So I always try to consult people around that I appreciate. And obviously the experts on the fields where I need to when I need to make decisions. And I think really the quality of decision or your decisions is going to improve, it is going to impact the quality of your life. So I think the better you get at doing the best decisions, the quality of your life is just going to improve, and you will stop repeating yourself the same mistakes. So you need to build around your mindset a larger view with people around you, but really be careful of the decisions that you make and try to become better at it because that has a direct impact in your life, in your work, in your projects. So I really believe in that. And the last one is about mindset. I think what you think becomes your reality.
yes.
And it took me years to understand this, but I used to be a negative person. It was more my nature, but I kind of realized that when you're negative, the universe just reproduces your mindset. So if you're negative, you're just going to receive more negative, more unlucky moments, more difficulties. But if you have a positive mindset and you're very careful with what you put in your mind and how you really cultivate your mindset, the universe is going to multiply that to you. So I try to be very careful. But these are lessons that really took me time to realize, a lot of time. And I'm somebody who really spends a lot of time in evolving as a person. So this is not necessarily lessons that somebody taught me, but it's through reading and through a lot of thinking that I have concluded these lessons that I think are very worth knowing.
Wow. So many great ones there. And I mean, folks, for those of you listening, it's probably worth if you rewind 30 seconds, a minute there just to take those in again. They'll be in the show notes as well too, but so many great things right there, Angela. All right, next is, what's one habit you do to keep a clear and healthy mind?
I love journaling.
Okay.
I am, I don't know, I maybe a journaling master.
I love it. We'll give you that title. We'll give
myself
okay.
because I started journaling when I was 15 years old, long
Okay.
time ago.
Yeah.
And I have developed my own protocols. And I come from Catholic education. So every time I write in my journal, I always say, "Hi, dear God, how are you?"
Hmm.
And then I start talking about how I am doing. And I am a very emotional person. And journaling helped me to clean my mind because emotions, they kind of become clouds that prevent you from seeing clear.
Mm.
So when I write about my emotions, I clean my mind and then clarity comes to me. And I also think that journaling, it's a way to talking with your unconsciousness. If you're able to do it regularly, and I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but when you're able to communicate with when your unconsciousness, there's a lot of wisdom that you will discover that is within you.
Oh yeah.
And journaling really is a direct bridge to that voice. So you are able to go beyond I mean, because we always hear the voice that we have in our heads, but we are more than that. And our ideas are deeper than that. So journaling really is a way to access that subconsciousness. And I'm able to get a lot of wisdom. And through journaling, I also work my intentional thinking. So it's my way to keep my thoughts clean, positive, and build that. And I believe in journaling so much that even I call my journaling magic books because I'm
I
able to
love it.
do magic through them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's so much like that comes out of that process. And not only that, I'm sure it also influences like what you were sharing earlier about how your decisions, right, shape those outcomes. And also, how it influences your mindset and how that impacts the results that you get and strive for and everything. So I love it. It's like a nice cascading effect that goes on there, it seems.
Yes, and a lot of it. I mean, I do a lot of my personal growth through my journaling, but I also manage our projects through journaling, which is funny because I do write my business plans when I'm writing, and every time I go to a convention, let's say when I'm coming back home in the plane, I always write, and it's a way to canalize what I learned because when you go to a convention, you're exposed to so much, right? And then I'm able to say, okay, what did I get from this convention? What did I get from hanging out with these people, with their mindsets?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm able to have clarity. Okay, what did I get for me, for my projects, for our company, for what we're planning to do? And I find huge opportunities of growth when I take the time to do that.
Absolutely love it. Such great stuff there. And
Mm.
now the last one, but not the least, and the staple here on the show, folks, is Angela. What game are you playing now?
I am a board gamer. I play a lot with my husband and with my friends. So recently we played Terraforming Mars.
Oh, we have that, and I have yet to play it. It's
Oh my God. You let me know when you play it. We love
okay.
it. Yeah, yeah. So we played that recently. And I also playing Mario Wonders with my daughter. She's 6 years old.
Mm,
So she's learning how to use the Manet. So we play Mario Wonders on the Switch.
love it. Those are some great games. One of them I know of, just not again. I'll learn it soon. But thank you so much for sharing all that information and stuff so we can get to know you a little bit more. And now let's get into our conversation. And as I let in the intro, folks, we're here to talk about building a sustainable studio without losing control. And it's tough, right? Managing any type of studio and everything with whether it's the climate or just any number of things, right? And we're only here for a certain amount of time, but we're definitely going to dive in and talk to, and discuss these things, especially from your perspective, Angela. So to kick things off, I mean, most developers in studios, let's say, focus on making a great game first, right? And that's so important. But where does that mindset fall short when it comes to building a studio?
Yes, I mean, I think I mean, we simplify it. I see in the industry for indie developers three mindsets. So the first one that classify is like an artistic driven mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and is the studio where they put everything on the technical side of things, and in creating their first good game, and then their plan is that success is going to carry everything else. And these teams tend to be very good at creative. So to create like not the right product, but a game that creatively has a good proposition from the artistic point of view, because it's an art expression, and indie consumer is looking for that new experience, right?
Yep.
They're not going towards the AAA because it's not that. It's really when you consume indie games is because you want the new experience, and that's where games excel, right? And that's how indie games have so much influence and impact in the industry.
Mm.
But then these teams have some drawbacks, right? Shortcomings. They don't think about the long term. They tend to ignore the market, and the importance of creating an audience. And this mindset used to be very successful at the beginning of the indie market, but now it's very difficult because we're in an overcrowded market. The second type of mindset that I see is I call it business driven developer. So these are the developers that have more of a business mindset and they're chasing hype and they're chasing opportunities. So they usually spot trends and very quickly they develop games that they put in the market very quickly because they're following these trends. And they tend to be more successful financially than the first segment. However, they don't create a long-term impact because you need to be very strong in the creative side to create a game that is remarkable. If you just follow trends and hype, you tend to be short in those propositions. And usually these games could satisfy a market segment that is craving for content, but these games tend to be not remarkable. Say they don't contribute to the development of your community or the development of your brand as a studio because it's just trends, right? So that's the second group. And the third one, I call it the hybrid mindset. And this one is the one that has the strength of the first, the artistic mindset. Because to be remarkable in indie, you need to be very creative in order to create an experience that is going to touch millions of people. So here at Clever Place, we try to have both. I created Clever Place with my husband, and he's actually the creative brain of Clever Place. And I believe really we are artistic driven, but we are also business driven. So we try to create, because if you're going to touch millions of people, you really need to be able to create that spark. And that's where the creative is very important in game development because this is art, what we create. So it cannot just be business. Plus, also sometimes the business driven developers, I personally don't find that inspiring. Like they are successful at some level, but it's not inspiring stories. And then coming back to the third model is the company that really combines both the artistic mindset with the business mindset. And when you have the business mindset, you are building a long-term project, right? More than just one game. So you make decisions differently about how you manage your budget, about how you hire people, about how you establish the brand of your studio, about your catalog. So that's how I see it.
I absolutely love that distinction and breakdown of the two groups because I think it's pretty clear. And yes, this is a high level, but it's pretty clear that we see these two groups all the time. And then, but what I love that last one where it's that combination because it's really that it's like the both sides that complement each other and that you're calling out. And I agree where that is going to be more art focused. It's going to stand out a lot better, but you still have that business mindset too, to a degree. And they complement each other so well that they're more likely than not to lead towards sustainability within the means. And that I love how you described like your current team, like you and your husband be like the creative and business driven, like these things complement each other. And I think that's says a lot to your team and probably other teams that are following similar models where it's nice to have that balance in place. So love that you call those things out. And plus, as you said too at the end, it helps with decisions. And what I'm curious about too is what would you say are some of the smaller, maybe that are seemingly reasonable decisions that a lot of studios will probably make and whatnot, but they end up maybe doing more damage to a studio over time? Like, what are some of these like hidden risks that we sometimes find ourselves getting into as studios, making these small, maybe not really bad decisions or seemingly not going to have much impact, but later down over time, they could impact us in a negative way down the road?
I mean, I think there's of course to be successful in game development, it's very difficult, and it's very difficult to get everything right.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's very difficult. But when I look at the story of our team or the teams of our generation, which is all our friends in the industry, that they created teams more or less at the same time as us. So obviously, I observe their stories and our story, and what I have seen is that the most successful teams, they have a balanced founder team. And what I mean by that is that they have a strong expertise team that is technically very strong. So a programmer or an artist or a designer, but they also have the skills for business development. It's either in the same person or in somebody else, but they care about it. Like I have seen teams that they're very weak in the business side of things, and in the long term is taxing because then they just stop in the first project or they really are not able to gather the elements that you need to build a sustainable business. So I think when you have a founder team that is imbalanced and lacking some critical business skills and marketing skills, that's very taxing with the time. So I think more balanced teams, they cover the technical aspect, but also the business aspect of it. So other common mistakes that I see is that they bet everything on a single title. So they just put everything without thinking what is going to happen afterwards. So the way I see it is that you need to plan initially when you start game development, you should plan to make two games, not simultaneously, but in a sense, like you need to plan in a way that you get organized to carry this endeavor at least for two titles, knowing that, and then you plan for failure at right from the start, or at least you're not planning on hypotheses that you don't control. Like, oh, I'm going to continue this if I make it successful. Yeah, but what if you're not?
Right.
Then you just wasted the endeavor, right? So I think you need to try to plan two, not simultaneously, but one after the other one. I think another mistake that I see sometimes is that certain teams try to chase the momentum of hype. So they say, oh, okay, right now is survival games. Right now is Souls-like games. And then they go into these genres. And then they try to shallowly copy the features or certain of these games that are successful, but not understanding the market, not understanding the consumer, why they like that. And then the games that they do, they're not remarkable and they don't bring value to the industry, and then that doesn't take off. Or other mistakes is rushing out of the prototyping phase because they want to go very quickly into production. Obviously, there is always pressure for the budget, but if your prototype is incomplete, production is not going to save a bad prototype. And I have seen that quite commonly, to be honest, and it's tragic. But I do understand that you have limits in your budget, but the prototyping phase is the phase that is going to set you for failure if it's done not properly. Something else that I see common is not under investing in playtesting and validation.
Yeah.
Like they don't play test enough, but play testing is very tough actually, because even if you do it, it's very noisy and it's very difficult to know what is the right comment and what you should ignore. And not everybody is going to love your game, and it's not white and black. It's people like you will get some positive answer here, some negative answer there, and some people that hate it. And you need to go through that and decide who do you listen to. So it's very tricky actually to do play testing, but you need to, because that's the only way to validate and to improve. But you also need to develop the capability to know what voices are going to matter and what voices you should ignore, because you cannot please everybody.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
is, it is very hard though. It's very hard to
Yeah.
do. It's necessary.
Oh,
Yeah.
like so many different difficult things and stuff. And I know a lot of us like face these, across the board. But I think what's interesting too is calling out, especially with the prototype, and even having like, let's say, considering two different projects, because from the get go, because that's like the starting point, right? And if we really look at where we're starting from, those I think are really two good call outs there. Because the other thing is, as you identified with the other studio type that you were saying, like the business driven, right?
Mhm.
And I think in the past few years, there's been a lot of talks about, hey, why don't we shorten that dev cycle and everything else, which is very smart and right to do. But there's always that caveat of, and I think what you called out just now is an important thing to consider is like, yes, you can shorten that dev cycle, but if you're not investing the right amount of time into, let's say, your prototype or whatever else, it really doesn't matter how short that dev cycle might be and how fast you're getting to market type thing, because if it's a lackluster experience because the effort didn't go into the prototype or anything else along those stages that are really essential, then it doesn't necessarily matter how fast you get to market either. So, but like you said, it's tricky. It's a balancing act, and it's also dependent on what your needs are too.
Yeah, no, it is very tough to balance all of that. But yeah, I have seen it in several teams that they really rush it and they hope it's going to be solved in production. And it's never solved. It just gets more
Yeah,
difficult. And then you end up releasing a game that is incomplete or just not remarkable.
yeah,
But it's a battle for resources
yeah.
and how you balance all of that.
Absolutely, because resources is the biggest thing, especially when it comes to like financial related ones, or even your team size. So, I'm kind of curious about like how would you say like financial decisions with things like budgeting or funding, or even the team itself. How can they actually shape whether a studio stays in control of its future? Because I mean, these are all things that we're struggling with every day. I would assume.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is no one formula that fits all. And here, like, it's Clever Place is in Canada. We're a Canadian company, and in Canada, there is a lot of help to companies, and I have seen other countries, and I think there is the more and more programs that support video games. And I think it's very important to learn what is in your environment to in order to get, even if it's a small money, all money counts. So coming back to your question, like how do you do these financial decisions? The story of Clever Place is pretty simple. When we started our company, we have 40,000. I say we're going to invest $40,000. And I also said we need to make two games with this 240, with this 40,000. So 20 for the first, 20 for the second. And I literally kept the second 20,000 in a bank account that I didn't touch. And I said, if it doesn't work, I have a plan B. It doesn't matter. And 20,000 is not a lot of money, but then I went after all the small money that I could find. And then obviously you start hiring people very low salaries because that's what you can do. And that's how we did it. So we put a lot of hours, but that's the classical story of developers. Most of us, we do that, right? We put the extra hours, like you put it with sweat, right? You don't have it in money, you put it with sweat. But we also went after all the resources that we could find to extend our options, and we did that. And then when we released Leap of Faith, it was not a great success. It's a great game, but it was not a great success, and we had a plan B. So we were able to go through that. So my advice from that point of view is that you need to budget based on your resources, and you need to budget like you're doing two projects, and you need to budget planning for failure. Because if success arrives, then that's itself, right? But if it doesn't, then at least you have a plan B where you will be able to carry on this endeavor of building a game studio. So, and obviously I say my story because that's what we did. And that's how it happens. Of course, there's people that say it's not necessary to have a plan B. I, I mean, obviously it's a choice. There's people that say, I only have one and I do everything. Yes, but I personally find that risky. And I'm more stressful because when you have a plan B, at least you're like, okay, I'm giving this, but I'm not going to lose it all. Like the other decision that we make when we created the studio was we're putting 40,000 and I'm putting 40,000. I'm not going to get into that because that's more risk, more
Yeah.
stress.
Yeah.
And you really also need to set up your personal finance in a way that allows you to carry on for a long time. Obviously, that's very personal, but I'm sharing here our story. So when we created the studio, I put on the line 40,000. I said, that's it for me. I can manage. If I lose it, it's okay. I did not get into any debt, but and Matthew, my husband, he quit his job at Ubisoft, but I kept my job for 8 years because I did not want to have that financial stress. And during 8 years, I had two jobs. I worked like crazy because I work at 4 in the morning every day. And then for 4 to 6, I would do Clever Plays. And then I would do my other job. And I have a son back then. So I was a mom as well. So it was very hard, but we were able to set up our personal finance in a way that we were there for the long run. And we were there ready for failure. And that's what happened. But we were able to go through that because we planned it. And then for the second one, then I say to my team, okay, we better be successful with this one because it's painful to go through failure. And then we learn from the lessons that Leap of Faith gave us. And Operation Tango is the correction. And we went into it. And that's when decisions, coming back to what I said initially, the quality of your decisions. So I said to my team, we cannot repeat the same mistakes. We need to create other mistakes, but not the same ones. And that's really when I created a very good marketing team to help us to improve our decisions related with marketing so that we were able to be successful with Operation Tango. But coming back to your question, so I think budgeting, planning your personal finance for the long term, budgeting with the resources that you control, and planning for failure. And that also impacts the scope for your team. So I think you need to, every time you hire, you need to be able to say, if I fail, can I carry this? So I think, and also you need to you need to have very present in your mind that larger teams doesn't mean more success. It just adds your cost because you need to coordinate, you need to manage all these people. So like at Clever Place, with our first team, we went up to 12 people, but right now we're 7 people in production. We don't hope to be a 30 people team. We're not going to do that. We might go into 12 people again, but we're going to keep it small because we think it's very costly and it just becomes a very different experience. And right now, in the way the industry is going through a lot of downsizing, I think is the smart thing to do is to keep it simple, keep it small. That helps really the long term of your projects and company. That's how we manage at Clearplace.
I love that whole story and breakdown. And the one thing I'll say too, because it was going through my head and you called it out, where people were people might come out and say, well, there's this belief or people doing this and I can recognize this and understand it too of, well, don't have a plan B. But I think a great way, and it's because it's like all or nothing, because if it's plan B, you're more likely to fall back on it. I've heard these in numerous different spaces and why sometimes that might not be a good idea. But I think in a way, and I think you realize this yourself and from your own experience too, is when you were talking, what was very clear to me was your plan B didn't really sound like a plan B. It was just always part of the plan. It was just like a condition, right? If this happens, then that, right? It's a very logic-based structure, which I think is great because a lot of us kind of follow these things, right? Especially with game development. But in your case, it's like, hey, if this happens, then we move on there. And then we move on to the next one. The plan B is really just still part of that big overall plan. And what I love about that, though, is it really sets clear expectations, not just for you, but your team and everything else. Because what's worse than getting to a point we had this ambition and hope and everything else seemed to align where this is going to be a success, and then it's not. And that now we're entering this time of uncertainty, an unknown, and you might have, like, you as a leader, whoever you are out there, might have a good idea of what that might be. But let's say for your team, they may not. And that uncertainty, that removes confidence. And that's where a lot of other little problems that you never anticipate can start surfacing for whatever the reason is, making whatever's next that much harder to ramp up and get ready for. But if it was already part of the plan, it's like, okay, this sucks, but this is what we're doing next. Everybody knows what they're doing. Let's move forward. That changes a whole lot. And that's exactly what you just described and from your own experience in a way where, I mean, you didn't say that deliberately, but that's the impression I would get, is at least those expectations are set. So the team knows this is what we need to do moving forward because we have this plan in place. It's already been established to.
Yeah. And I also think that when you have a plan B and things don't go well, it's just easier because it gives you a horizon, and failure is so hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, in game development, I find it extremely hard because, I mean, nobody loves your game. You put your heart in your game. These games are like babies, right? They're emotional items that we create. And then when people push back against what you created and they don't like it, I physically felt it, like they were punching me in the face, literally. And it's very painful. and it's painful for everybody because we all pull our hearts and our blood. I think there's blood in games because we worked so hard. So there is your blood, there is your baby, there is your heart. People reject it. And then how are you going to go through this? And it's a very painful moment, to be honest. Or at least for us, it has been. It is painful. So when you have a plan B, it just helps you to go through it in a better way. But I'm very positively. My nature is to be controlling. So I always need to have a plan. So I always need to have a plan, but that's the way how I manage stress.
Yeah.
And also the way, because as I mentioned at the beginning, my nature, I was not positive by nature. I became a positive person by work on myself. But my nature was to see things, okay, this is not going to work. What can I do? And that's a way for me. When I have a plan B, it reduces my stress because it gives me control. It's like, okay, if it
Yeah.
doesn't work, I know what's happening and I know what I have to do. And then that just it's part of the company, your company culture. Like, and I think that when your team sees that you have a long-term vision, and obviously sometimes that vision includes failure, but at least I think it gives them confidence, like, okay, this is a company that has a vision. And if it rains, we go through. If it's a storm, we go through, and we go through whatever life throws at us. But I mean, obviously, we're not bulletproof, but we try to be.
Yeah. And again, I like that so much. And you just said too, because,
Mhm.
that planning for you personally, you said having that plan gives you that level of control, and that level of control helps you with any, these stressors that can obviously surface, and they're still going to cause stress. But when they do, at least you're like, all right, I know what to do. And I want to go into that for a quick moment a little deeper, because from my understanding, human behavior in general, when we're in these moments of uncertainty, we try to then gravitate towards things that we do have control over.
Mm.
But if you don't have that overarching plan, right,
Mhm.
in terms of what those next steps are, what is it the types of things that we do gravitate towards to maintain that control? It's like, oh, I'm going to do something that makes me feel busy. I'm just going to double down and work on the game and not worry about anything else. Or, you gravitate towards something that makes you feel good, or you know that you have that control over. But if that control isn't contributing to the overall project or the goal or the next steps for to maintain sustainability, then all that you're doing is kind of like working in this little bubble, and maybe not realizing what else is really happening. Like I think what happens is we tend to get like shut ourselves in and focus on busy work or other things that feel good or feel like we have control, when the reality might be we don't have that control. And I think it's a clear difference in what you were calling out compared to what sometimes people may do.
Yeah, and also circling back about the initial question, I think it's also about being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you're honest about the facts, then you're able to advance. For me, it's the only way. The rest is a waste of time, of energy, of everything. But when you have the honest evaluation, it's like, okay, this is bad, this can be bad. What can you really realistically expect and do that is going to help you move forward? And I think when you work based on honesty, that gives you a better chance to really advance. The rest is a waste.
Yeah, I think that's really good that you called that out too, because what you're saying here too is it starts becoming one of these things that studios then can recognize. Like earlier, you mentioned something along the lines of, at least if you fail, like, or I think you said earlier, if I'm remembering correctly, you shared with him, hey, look, we can make new mistakes now. We're just not making the same ones. We can make new ones, but at least we're learning from them and moving forward. How is it that you think is helpful when studios start recognizing those patterns or revisiting those mistakes, looking internally and all those steps? And as they move forward, how is it that they can like kind of like course correct as they see those things, or continue to grow without losing control? Is it just from the past learnings, or like how do they move forward from all these things?
That's a large question because it depends on what is the situation, what is the misstep. But I think coming back to you need to be on to honesty, right?
Yeah.
You need to be try to be very aware of your strengths and your weaknesses and what you're trying to accomplish in a realistic way. And when teams overextend themselves, it's because they are under the belief that they are stronger than they are. And they are on their, because they receive funding or they receive hype, and then you just try to chew more than you can swallow, right? So you extend your team, you extend your scope, or you just trust your instincts and you dismiss play testing. So that when you have some overconfidence built in something that happens to you, that's what I see with some teams, that they tend to underestimate or overestimate their situation, and that's when they miss steps and then they make big decisions that lead to big mistakes. So they build a bigger team, and it's very difficult to carry a big team, especially now that there is
Yeah.
less funding, right? So I think you always, I think the way to correct that, I will say, is really you need to, I don't want to be negative. I think is to be realistic. What if this fails? Can I carry that 50 people team if
Yeah.
this fails, right? Can I, and that, and also in these conditions, it's like we are in this industry, in this context where funding is more difficult. And I think right now we use like a Clever Place, we have been very conservative the way we manage. And people were like, oh, why don't you grow faster? But we didn't believe in that. But I think now the context is making people realize it's like, that's true. You need to be agile. You need to be small, enabled in a way that you can carry with your team. And at the end, what you want is to create a stable jobs and a good company culture. And if you go to 50 people to 10, that's hard. That's going to hurt your culture. So you need to be responsible with your team. It's not just hiring for hiring. And I think here in Canada, I think our people tend to underestimate Clever Case because we're small.
Yeah.
So they pay more attention to video teams because people have that belief like, oh, look, they have more people, therefore they're better. Are they really?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not our philosophy. We try to be very responsible how we manage our budgets, how we grow, because we want to be able to carry what we're doing for a long time because we love what we do. And we try to also be very responsible with our team, my employees, our employees. We try to be very responsible with them. So we try not to overpromise. We try to be realistic, and we try to overdeliver. Not always happens, but that's what we try to do.
Oh,
But coming back,
but that's one of my main things too, though, is like what you just said there is like under promise, over deliver. Right. And, but I think that's a great way to summarize all that. But, you know, really lots of good points there in terms of like, what I bring this back to is what you kind of led with earlier is like, you know, really be true to yourself and really like, open yourself up, like kind of explore what are you thinking internally in your mind and everything else. And ask like tough decisions, tough questions, that can help you make those tough decisions, because the reality is like, hey, you don't have to do what everybody else is doing or what seems to be the right thing. What is right for you in that moment? Because if you really don't scrutinize or think hard about it, it could open yourself up to potential problems down the road. And I know we're coming on time here, but the last question I'm curious about is, in light of all this, like if a studio really wants to build something that lasts, I don't know, like 5-10 years, what would you think should be a shift in how they think about growth from the very beginning?
about growth. So let me think about this again. So the long term, I think it, I think there are certain things that you must have to be successful, and there is no compromise on those. First, you need to create a remarkable game. And that comes from a highly creative team. So I don't think you could sacrifice creativity because it's the only way you're going to touch millions of people. And that's what you want to do. That's a successful game, is a game that was able to touch emotionally millions of people. And that comes from a very creative team. So you cannot sacrifice creative, I think, but you also need to plan for failure, as I say in this podcast, and you need to be honest about what you can deliver and try to go into a market space where there is appetite for that and you can deliver something that is remarkable. And those market segments exist,
Mm.
but it's not all market segments that is like that. So you need to be able to decide based on your strengths what you can deliver and really bring creativity towards one of those market segments that is craving for content, and those market segments exist. And then you need to invest in that. And I also think that in order for you to keep control on your project, on your studio, you need to be in control of your marketing. Because sometimes that philosophy is fading now, but it's like, oh, the publisher will do it.
Yep.
And it's like, no, you should do it, because first of all, the publisher should be like your plan B. Your
Yep.
plan A should be self-publishing. And if you need the publisher for funding, that's good. But if you're doing your own marketing, first of all, the publisher is going to appreciate you more. And if you don't find a good publisher, you are in control of your marketing. You don't need to sign a bad deal. So marketing is also part of how you build a sustainable studio and how you keep control of your endeavor. I did not mention that before, but I really believe, like when we were doing Operation Tango, we started doing marketing pretty early because it was one of the lessons that we got from Leap of Faith, that Leap of Faith marketing was not very good. So from day one, we were obsessed, like, oh my God, how am I going to solve this problem? And then we were able to gather a very good team and we did a great campaign. And then we started looking for publishers. And then we only got bad deals. But because we were in control of our budget and we were in control of our marketing, we were able to walk away from those. And I did not sign by deals. And I told the publishers, like, how you dare to offer this to me? It's like, what? And there was even a publisher that told me, Angela, your marketing's so good that you do the marketing, I do the distribution. And I was like, I'm sorry, but no, I'm not going to sign that. And we did it. And I'm happy I did it. But if I didn't create that condition for me, I would have signed anything, because I was like, oh my God, I'm not in control of my marketing. I need somebody to save me. But I avoid that because I said, no, I'm going to do it with my own resources, with my own effort, and see what happens. And I wanted a publisher, but I did not find the right publisher. And we were able, at the end, I have to self-publish, and it was successful because we took care of it. So you need to take care of things. And obviously, we need publishers because they bring money. And some of them are awesome. I'm not going to say they're all bad. Some of publishers are pretty good. They really can change the fate of a good team. They can, because they have more infrastructure. The ones that are more established or they're more creative in their marketing tactics, they bring value, but they're all not good. And there are some very bad deals there. So when you are in control of your situation, your finance, your marketing, your product, the size of your team, it's just easier to navigate, and it's easier to build a long-term studio, I think.
I absolutely love it. And you're right. There's so many times that yes, we will need help from outside sources and things like that. That's a given. But to have that level of control and understanding of these different areas of your business is just going to give you that much more control, and is going to allow you to have that level of clarity that we're always looking for and everything else. And that just makes all the difference, is actually taking ownership, like you said, in these situations. It doesn't mean you have to have that ownership all the time, but there's nothing worse than it's like, hey, do this. And where I'm telling someone to do this for me, but yeah, I have no idea what's going on. I at least need to have some understanding of what's happening, because otherwise, who knows? And you can't get upset with something if you don't know anything about what you're asking people to do for you too. Like
Yeah, and that can lead you also to make bad decisions because
Yep.
you don't know what's happening, or because you did not plan, you did not include those variables. You just, oh my God, somebody has to save me. And it's no,
Yeah.
you build yourself, you build your project, you build your marketing as much as you can. And then you will create a position in which you can make better decisions
Yeah.
for you and your team.
Said. Angela, I know we're at time here and everything, but before we go, I know that you have, well, one thing, kind of a special thing that you're willing to share with our listeners if they're interested in, and what is that exactly?
We're giving away Operation Tango keys. How do we distribute them?
Yes. So I would say we do have, so in a minute, we'll drop your links and stuff. But for anybody who is interested in these keys, I would say shoot Angela an email. Just say Indie Game Movement or IGM in the subject line. So that way she knows there's a limited amount too. So it's first come, first serve. And Angela, for anybody who is either interested in the Operation Tango keys or would like to connect with you, learn more about Clever Plays, what are some links and ways that people can reach out to you?
I mean, I am very active on LinkedIn. That's the social media that I personally use the most. And I also, people can send me an email at info@clever-place.com.
Excellent. And so LinkedIn,
Mhm,
that email address, info at, and
mhm.
of course, there's also clever-plays.com too, if they want to check out the studio and what projects you guys have working on, which,
Yes, yes. And I mean, right now we're in the middle of the campaign of Happy Bastards. So if you like turn-based games, uh, check it out. It's Happy Bastards. How can I say happy? I need to find the website address. Let me just find that.
okay, well, we'll be sure to put that in the show notes too. And
Uh-huh.
let's see if I would assume too that you could probably get there from the Clever Play site as well too. But
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure.
excellent,
And
yeah. I think
thank
it's
you,
just
Andrew,
Happy
for this
Bastards Game.
invitation. Huh?
I think it's just happybastardsgame.com. So if you want to check out that game too. But again, Clever Plays will get you there too, folks. And Angela, it's been an honor and pleasure having you here on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights and everything. It's been great.
Thank you, Andrew. And talk to you again. Thank you, thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.